We have 4 councillors online. We've got Councillor Harpeta, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Deputy Mayor, and we have Mr Armstrong online. And we also have our Chief Infrastructure Officer, Sarah Sinclair, online. Now, because we've got so many online, we are going into manual voting today. So just to clarify that everything is going to be done by hand for all those ones online. And if you... Oops, we've disappeared. That's okay. Okay, we've got you back. So can you just wave your hands to let me know that you can hear us? Thanks very much. Okay, so I've done that. So we'll now move on to the apologies. So I have apologies for Councillors Alicia Rutherford and the Mayor for late arrival, and I have an apology for Councillor Bowen for early departure. I'm not aware of any other apologies. Is there anybody else? So I'll move the apologies. Have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Naylor. We'll just wait for the others to come online. So could everyone please raise their hands if they're for the minutes? Sorry, for the apologies. Anybody against? Nope, so that is carried unanimously. Item number 2 is notice of additional items, and I'm not aware of any. And item number 3, declarations of interest, and I'm not aware of any. Are there any? Nope, so I'll move on now to item number 4, which is public comment. And we have Rob Campbell online, who is the Palmy Bid Chair. So when we get you up, Rob, I can see you. So can you hear and see us? So when you're ready, you may start. So you have 3 minutes for public comment.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to present to the meeting. As you've stated, my name is Rob Campbell. I'm Chair of Palmy Bid, an organisation that is funded by and represents the Central City community. I want to talk today about safety and security, which is an emerging, current and critical issue for all of us who visit, work and live in the city centre. Unfortunately for some, Te Marae Ohini is not the courtyard of the Daughter of Peace. It is the place where their grandson, son or nephew had their head split open by an unseen attacker, where their daughter or niece witnessed a knife attack, or where their aunt or mother was verbally threatened while shopping or running their business. There has been a surge in recent times of youth crime in the city centre. Our rangatahi, who are very young, no more than early teens, are congregating and creating many of these outcomes. The age of these rangatahi means that legal solutions are not easy to implement, and their family circumstances are such that solutions at home are difficult to achieve. In many cases, the rangatahi are themselves victims. I want to talk today also about our City Ambassadors program. The ambassadors have been at the forefront of this issue over the summer, and from what we can see, they have made an impact. We see their presence as authority figures as tending to influence behaviour. We see them observing and reporting activity to the police where it warrants it. We also see them engaging and connecting with rangatahi, potentially opening the door to social service agencies and others to provide long-term solutions to what are often complex problems. The problem hasn't gone away, and the ambassadors are not the whole solution, but we see them as an important part of the way forward. The Ambassadors program ends in just a few days. Traditionally, as you know, we have focused on the summer months as the time when the city centre is possibly, use of the city centre is possibly at its height. We need to rethink this. Rangatahi don't disappear on March the 1st. Their problems don't end when the summer ends. We want to encourage all our people to enjoy the city centre all year round. And to do that, our people need to feel safe and they need to be safe. On behalf of our community, I want to offer Council BID's help in finding a practical, permanent solution to safety and security in our city centre. Let's make the courtyard of the Daughter of Peace a reality. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Rob. And I'll just check if any of the councillors have any questions to ask you. Councillor Harpeta, you're online. Would you like to start?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Rob. I just wanted to know what the reaction was from the retailers about the ambassadors, how that interaction is from them.
I think that is positive. The retailers see them as authority figures and someone reinforcing normal social behaviour in that area. So yes, the retailers were very positive.
Thank you. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Rob. Rob, if I ask you, is there a single magic solution in your mind what could be done to stop all this?
Well, I don't know that there is a silver bullet, Councillor. I think this is a problem that that waxes and wanes over the years as the rangatahi in our city change and grow. I think the Ambassadors program is looking like a way to identify the people that are involved, the children that are involved, and a way of providing or accessing solutions for them. It's a problem that will never go away completely. It's something that we need to continue to work at. But I think it's the cornerstone of making our central city feel safe.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Rob, for speaking to us on this matter. Just wanted to pick up on your generous offer that you signaled at the end to first understand, are you hoping to see something in place that would essentially see continuity of what is there rolling forward, or are you thinking that there may be a gap but you'd be looking for reinstatement?
I think we need to understand what a long-term solution looks like. It may be that the Ambassadors program is continued, but not as intensively as it is over the summer period. It may be it changes slightly. I'd like to open dialogue and understand what is suitable, what's reasonable, what's practical. And you know, I'm happy to understand what the funding implications of that are. There may well be capacity to direct philanthropic or commercial funds to assist if we can get to a solution that works.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Rob. I suppose just a little bit of clarification in terms of the ambassadors within the Te Marae o Hine. You said there's been a behaviour change amongst the rangatahi within the inner city. Is that because of the engagement, you think, of the ambassadors?
The feedback we've had is that it is that they're engaging and the rangatahi are opening up to that engagement. So, you know, it's early steps and they're formative steps. But yes, that is the feedback that we've had.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I suppose just the bid would be open, I suspect, to some dialogue with the Safety Advisory Board in the future?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great, thanks. I'll be in touch.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions? I'm not aware of any. Okay, so that's the end of the questions. Thank you very much, Rob, and thank you for your positive comments about the ambassadors, and I'm sure our people will be talking to your people. So
wonderful. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks again. Have a good day.
Thank you. Right, we're now moving on to... no, we're not. We're just going to accept the public comment. I'm happy to move the public comment be accepted and seconded by Councillor Butt. So we will vote when we get the faces up. Okay, all those in favour, please raise your hand. Anyone against? No, that's carried unanimously, thank you. So we now will move on to item number 5, the confirmation of the minutes. Happy to move the minutes. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Naylor. Are there any comments regarding the minutes? I'll just check on screen. No one waving their hand, so we will vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a very, very small one on page 13. There's a note there that says, further discussion on this item was adjourned until later in the meeting. Referred to page 10 below for the remainder of the consideration of this item.
Sorry, Councillor, could you just...
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
it was muffled, sorry.
All right. On page 13, there's a note there that says, further discussion on this item was adjourned until later in the meeting. Refer to page 10 below for the remainder of the consideration of this item. But there is no page 10, and so I'm just wondering if that needs to be tidied up.
I've just passed...
It's page 10 in the actual minutes, but it's page 16 in today's agenda.
Okay. Okay, so it's page 10 of the actual minutes and it's page 16 of today's papers. So it is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So we will now vote to accept the minutes. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Is there anyone against? No one is against, so that is carried unanimously. Now, we now move on to item number 6, which is, and I'd just like to welcome the Acting Chief Financial Officer, Cameron Mackay. So Cameron will be presenting the quarterly performance and financial report today, and that is on page 19. And so over to you, Cameron, when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair and councillors. Good morning to you. Take the 6-month report as read, but just want to make a few points. I think the theme for the 6-month report is consistent with what was reported to you at the first quarter mark. Our performance so far has been impacted by COVID-19 this year. The delays due to the lockdown and subsequent red settings is having an impact on us. Perhaps the biggest impact to us has been on our ability to deliver on our capital program to date, and we've gone into some commentary about that. And we expect that the lockdown that has occurred at the start of the year will mean that we will have a higher incomplete program towards the end of the year. We also are experiencing supply chain issues and obtaining labour. Our vacancies still remain. We still have a number of vacancies that we're trying to fill, and I think that is something that's impacting many businesses and councils throughout the country. In terms of operating, we are running a high surplus, which is sitting at 5.1 million. Just noting of that, 1.1 million of that does relate to operating programs that will carry over, being digital transformation and Tihuranga, which is the ozone replacement. And in terms of trying to improve our deliverability, we are conducting a deliverability review, which we will report back to you in the March Infrastructure Committee to outline some of the progress we're making in that space. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Thanks, Cameron, for your report. Just firstly, just to pick up on a comment you just made in terms of the high surplus, you mentioned 1.1 million was operational programs, and did you say including the transformation program?
Digital transformation, yes.
As in the transformation one, as in the cultural transformation?
No, digital transformation.
Oh, digital, sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Digital, okay. So, and did you say that one will be carried forward?
Yes, because it is a multi-year program.
Okay. Now, just coming back to, I did have a few questions of the report. Just firstly, oh, sorry, just find page, on page 32, under the Catalyst projects, the Civic and Cultural Precinct Master Plan. Now, I guess my question is, should that be being referred to as a draft? Because I'm aware that that program, the direction for that is to consult with the community on costings and timing. And normally when we have a master plan, it's referred to as a draft before the council has approved it. And the previous draft wasn't approved by the council, and I'm just noticing in the documentation that's coming through it often, it's sort of, and particularly with change of staff, I'm just wondering if that should be actually being referred to as the draft Civic and Cultural Precinct until such time as council has approved it.
You're correct. Any of those documents that we prepare until such time as are approved are a draft. So I guess we're referring to it in a general sense in terms of its project, and that it is the Civic and Cultural Precinct Master Plan. So I think what you're really talking about is a process issue rather than a labelling issue.
Yep, it is a process issue, but it's also a labelling issue in terms of the fact that on documents where master plans have been listed in the council, that one has been included along with all the other ones that have been endorsed or approved by council, whilst that one actually hasn't been approved by council. So I just wouldn't want staff or any new staff or new councillors to misunderstand the status of that work.
We can reflect on that as part of the preparation of the next quarterly report.
Thank you. That's appreciated. Just moving to page 35. Just a question around the process for inclusion of new KPIs. I note that the Goal 5 Driven and Enabling Council only has one KPI compared to the other 4 goals have got many KPIs, and I'm just wondering when are those KPIs reviewed, and when is there, how are new ones added, or where are there input from elected members to perhaps strengthen those KPIs?
Councillor, Madam Chair, all the KPIs in the 10-year plan and measured here are set through the 10-year plan by councillors.
So can they only be added to every 3 years?
I would think yes.
Yeah, because of audit issues, yes. Unless you redo the whole 10-year plan, yes.
Okay, thank you. Just looking at page 73, sorry, jumping ahead. At the financial statements, there's a little bit of commentary in the report about the variance under employee remuneration. So we're obviously tracking behind budget by, I think it said about 1.7 million because of the vacancies. Now, it just would be good to have an understanding where there are vacancies and there are backfill or there are consultants employed to do the work of those vacancies. Does the cost of that come out of employee remuneration, or does the cost of any external consultants come out of another budget?
To answer the question, so it depends on the type of backfill. So if it's a consultant coming in and backfilling for us, then that will come out of employee remuneration expenses. However, if it's a professional service that we've procured outside of staffing, they're not working as part of staff, then they come through under the professional service costs.
Okay, thank you. And just looking at professional service costs, I note that the annual budget amount of 11.6 million for that budget has been revised to be 14 million, and I'm just wondering why the additional 2.4 million in that budget.
I don't have the answer to that in front of me, but I can endeavour to get one to you.
That's fine, thank you. Now, just moving to page 76 of the approved variations. So, page 76 are the variations that have been approved by council, and then looking at page 77, other variations approved by the Chief Executive. There's, in terms of the variations that have been approved by the Chief Executive, there doesn't seem to be a lot of information about any operational variations, and I'm just wondering where would we find information in the quarterly report on operational variances?
Can I just clarify further? So this part of the report, the table outlined there, is in relation to the delegations manual where variations are greater than 10% of the budget, so we report them through here. In terms of overall variances, we do put commentary in regards to where we do have some variances. For example, the commentary around the digital transformation adding to the surplus amount that is earlier in the report.
Okay, so when, obviously, I mean, in reflecting, just to explain a little bit where I'm coming from, and reflecting on the overall reporting, there's quite a lot of detailed reporting on variances to all the capital programs, and I think that reporting is very strong. In terms of the information that I would be looking for in here around the operational variances, I perhaps don't see that. And are you suggesting that any operational variance that's over the 10% that's outlined in the delegations manual is outlined in this report?
Yes.
Of any one program?
Yes. Yes, because the definition in the delegations manual refers to operating budgets, including operating programs. So it's inclusive.
So where's the detail of that? Because I'm not finding it.
It's been answered, councillor, so I think perhaps if you take it offline if you can't find it.
Yes.
Okay, so just to move on then, the delegations, that commentary at the top of that page that refers to the delegations manual gives the Chief Executive the ability to transfer budgets where this will best achieve the outcome intended and savings can be made to offset the authorised increase. And where the amounts authorised cross activities, these are required to be reported quarterly to the Finance and Performance Committee. So that paragraph, I haven't found evidence of that. That does describe quite a fluid picture in terms of the reporting that comes here. I couldn't find that in the delegations manual, and I'm just wondering where has that paragraph come from?
I would have to check with the team just to confirm exactly the...
Okay, and just I guess further to that, in the delegations manual, the variations to budget, there are some quite specific limitations, including being limited to, giving officers the authority to approve budget variations limited to 30% of the relevant...
Councillor, I think all these questions have been answered, and there is a delegations review coming up in March.
This is related
But,
to
so
a
what
further...
specific items in the report are you referring to?
Okay, I guess my question is, are there any single operating programs within our budget that currently are expected to exceed the 30% above that program
Not that
in our current
not that
financial
we
year?
are currently aware of, no.
Okay, that's helpful. I think that's all for now,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have several specific questions about specific programs,
That's fine.
which we'll just touch on. Page 29 of the report indicates a couple programs in the active transport space. Just regards program 1559, which is in the upper right. There's reference there to a refreshed approach with Wakakatahi, and just wanted to understand, given that potential difference in investment, are we looking at actually scaling up the overall investment, or is it about keeping the same investment envelope but winding down the council side of the investment?
Through the chair, I can answer that question. We're looking at keeping the same level of investment and looking at how we can capitalise on more co-funding through a recent expression of interest we've lodged yesterday with Wakakatahi.
Thanks. So when you say the same level of investment there, that's the council side of investment would stay the same and potentially leveraging more from Wakakatahi?
Correct.
Great, thank you. While you have the microphone, I might try the second question, which relates to 2056, which is the program just below that, which references e-bike charging infrastructure in the city centre. Just would like to know if that opportunity is also going to address the lack of publicly available secure parking facilities for e-bikes in the city centre, or is it only going to be charging?
We're looking at the whole issue at the moment. So part of that program is about a facility for e-bike charging, but we have to look at the whole security, storage in the program. So there's a bit of work being done at the moment to identify what we need and where we need it strategically and how to best spend the money we've got.
Cool, great, thank you. Switching themes a little bit, just around the notice of requirement for the Riverside path to Ashurst. I see that there's some external contingencies there around timing of that with some external reports coming. Could we just get any update relative to what is in writing in terms of expected timing around the notice of requirement?
Sorry, Councillor, I don't have that information. Our legal advisor...
She's on.
Desiree?
Desiree's online. Desiree, would you like to answer that? Earth to Desiree.
Hello, can you hear me? Apologies.
Would you please repeat the question for Desiree?
Yeah, hi Desiree, Councillor Barrett here. Just interested around the Riverside path to Ashurst and the notice of requirement process. The papers indicate that there is some external information yet to be acquired, and just wondered if there's an update specifically around the timing of that expected notice of requirement.
My understanding is that work is being done behind the scenes, and that we are hoping to be in a position to lodge the notice in the next few months. So my understanding from infrastructure is around May.
Great, thanks Desiree. Final question, Madam Chair, around page 49, which is in the KPIs space. I'll give you a moment to get there, page 49. Just in the environmental sustainability measures at the top of the page, measure 2 indicates that we now have a long-term planting plan that's been established between our council and Horizons. I just wanted to understand, in general, the nature of that plan, but specifically whether it will be publicly communicated or whether that's only an in-house document.
Who would like to answer that one? Thank you, Bryce.
Bryce.
We'll have to come back to you on that. We don't have information at this stage.
That's great. Thank you. Madam
Thank you,
Chair.
Councillor. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions, I think, are in the space of the $4 million operating surplus that we're not going to carry forward. And I might be seeking a level of granular detail that's not, it's certainly not in this report and might not be available today. So I'll ask my question and then happy to take that offline if that can't be answered here. But I have been seeking that information from officers behind the scenes. So my concerns are around the measures described on page 45 and 46 of our report. Measure 44, 45, measure number 2, 8, 9, which are all around our events programme. And elected members won't be surprised to hear me raise that. So my question is, are we able to quantify the underspend in the events space? And is there anything we can do to repurpose that funding within this financial year?
We would be able to quantify that, just not in front of me. In terms of repurposing, that would need to come through by way of request, and we'd put that through council, I would imagine, depending on the delegation's manual.
That's probably the answer I was expecting. The measures I've pointed to describe events in libraries, in community-led projects, and in our community and city centre events. I'm also interested in our major events and our sponsorship type funding. But Madam Chair, I'll draft up a recommendation to seek that further information and to have that noted in this committee.
Chris Dyberg should be able to answer that, Councillor.
Yes, I'll be seeking a report on it through this committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's fine. Are any further questions?
That's me.
Okay, Councillor Hancock, but just before I go, could staff please announce who they are and what department they are, because just for the people online it's hard for them to work out who's who. Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question, I may have to do some follow-up later on, but just in terms of page 39 and the figures just around serious crashes, can I just understand if there's any other information that can go with that, and also whether or not council is collaborating with either police or NZTA in respect of those statistics that relates to an uptick in serious crashes in the city?
Through the chair.
It's Sarah is online is going to answer that. Sorry, Sarah.
So I was just going to say, Sandra King can add to this, but through the chair, yes, we are. The statistics that we have come from NZTA, so we're very closely working with NZTA on this. We don't always necessarily get the statistics directly from the police as early as they happen, so it would be good if we could get earlier information from the police, but it does rely on information from both. The second part of your question I'll direct to Sandra, if she's there.
Yes, thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Sarah.
Through the chair, if I could just add to what Sarah says, we do monitor what happens on the network through the media, which tends to be the quickest way sometimes. and we do liaise with police over the actual incident and what happened, and analyse whether it's something to do with our asset that's caused it, whether it's a behaviour issue, and how we need to potentially implement programs. Councillor Hancock, could you repeat the second part to your question, please, that Sarah was referring to? Or have I answered it?
Yeah, I think that's been adequately answered at this point in time, but yeah, I suppose it probably points to a gap which I can also do some follow-up outside this forum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Cameron. I have a couple of questions. The first one is around the deliverability review. Could you just outline what the objective of that review is, and perhaps provide some colour around what the criteria management are applying in that review?
If I could pass that to the Chief Infrastructure Officer, if she's available.
Through the Chair. Thank you, Cameron. The criteria, Sarah Sinclair, Chief Infrastructure Officer. The deliverability review is really focused on looking internally and externally at resourcing and I guess as much as anything else, the impacts of COVID across the market. Really, what it's looking at is taking the sort of the stages of a project, the various stages of a project of feasibility, design, tenders and consents, construction, testing where the elements of work that we've got in this financial year and in the next couple of financial years are on that scale, and then looking at what's left to do, the timetable to do it in, and whether or not, what the market constraints are at the moment. If I give you an example of what that looks like in reality, for example, utes have got an 18-month waiting list. Most overseas stuff has an extremely high waiting list. You'll all be aware from the paper that things like GIB.
Sorry, Sarah, we have lost you. Might pay to turn your screen off.
Oh, okay. I don't know how far you got with that, but essentially we're looking at constrained supply and the impacts of constrained supply, particularly overseas, but also, I'll try a different room.
Sorry, we've lost you again. So.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Sarah.
Through the Chair, what we're looking at, we look at the various stages of a project and whether the project's in feasibility, design, tenders, construction, and then we essentially are looking at the constraints that we're facing, whether that's specific constraints we're aware of in the supply chain, lack of contractors, lack of designers, long lead-in times for materials, and then looking at where we've anticipated that the money would be spent, when we've anticipated the money would be spent, and seeing if that's realistic with a programme that is anticipating ongoing COVID-related delays and resourcing constraints.
Thank you, Sarah. I guess there were a couple of things that were in my mind when I asked that question. One of them is, perhaps you might just outline, health and safety, staff well-being, in relation to the fact that we're scarce on the ground for resources. How has that been factored into your thinking? And also, just more generally, for example, if you take a large data transformation IT-related project at a time when, you know, we're at an inflection point socially, there's a lot of disruption, there's significant potential for disruption. So a project of that nature has enormous risk to the organisation. So how is that sort of thinking being captured in this review?
Through the chair, I can only speak for the infrastructure elements of the deliverability review. In terms of staff constraints, yes, it's very difficult to find engineers. We're expensive, and we are rare, and we're a highly prized and sought commodity. Please don't laugh, that's true. It's actually really difficult to find resources like engineers. It's also really difficult to find some of the skilled trades, and prices are going through the roof. In terms of our own staff, part of the constraint that we face, that we're looking at in resourcing, is the constraints on our own staff. The restructure of infrastructure has just increased staff numbers in some areas where there was a lack, particularly because of the pressures on some of those elements. But yes, part of our deliverability review is very much looking at how we can adequately resource to maintain well-being.
And safety. And
safety, absolutely. Safety is a non-negotiable.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. My next question is also relatively high level, but I just notice the situation at the 6-month point with the operating surplus, the difficulty in spending against our capital budget. And then when I look at the revised budget and the assumptions around expenses and Kpis and borrowings, it seems to be driven by a view that we'll catch up and that everything's going to swing round and that we'll spend and do what we said we'd do. And that seems a brave assumption to me. And I'd just like to understand a little bit better what the implications or the scenarios might be in terms of balance sheet, in terms of the opening position when you're thinking about next year's budget, and just how is the management team contemplating pulling that together and navigating their way through this uncertainty?
I'll have a crack at trying to answer that question through Madam Chair. We've got, alongside this work stream, we are also going through the preparation for the annual budget. So there's a number of things flowing into that we are reflecting on. So the work that Sarah, Chief Infrastructure Officer, has outlined in terms of deliverability review is helping us to inform us of where we think we might land at the end of this year. We're still working on that piece of work, but we have factored into, when we're going through the annual budget process, which is to come before Council next week, we are working through revising our opening balance assumptions. We do realise that we are more than likely to have a lower external debt position at the end of this year than what the long-term plan suggested we were going to be at, just purely because we haven't progressed the capital program because of the delays that have been outlined. Does that help answer your question?
In part, I guess it suggests that it's a significant work in progress still, but could be quite different in terms of what's been presented in this report. When you're working your way through that, Cameron,
excuse me, Mr. Armstrong, the Chief Executive, would just like to make a comment.
Yes, I would not want you to think that we think that everything is going to be, I think you used the phrase honky-dory, by the end of this financial year. And I've just reread my introduction to think of somehow I have led you to that assumption. I don't believe that I have. I don't think that I have said, or any of my officers have said, that we will achieve everything that we have set out to achieve for the year. I think we've given a very clear indication of why that isn't the case. I don't think we've given any indication that all the surpluses will be used within the next 4 to 5 months either, and that we are actively working on the annual budget plan as to what is going to be carried forward, including operating programs where we can, and what that means as a consequence for our end-of-year position.
Thank you, Heather. I'm clear on that. I was just reflecting on the revised budget numbers and the detail of the report, and I guess I appreciate that. It is a difficult situation. It could be quite different where we actually end the year from what's set out in the detail of the report. A question then, though, my last question is, I guess the world's somewhat different now. We've got increasing cost pressures both within the business and within the community due to inflation and higher interest rates. And I guess the difficulty in securing staff is changing the risk profile on a lot of what we do. So how are you thinking? I mean, is there a change in direction? What's in your mind going forward in terms of how things might look? I mean, how are you thinking about next year's budget based on the performance to date and the issues that and uncertainties that you're dealing with?
I can answer that in part, and others may be able to fill in the gaps. As we are progressing through the annual budget discussions and using perhaps the easier example of capital program, we are not simply taking what we haven't spent this year is going to roll into next year, and we're going to do that on top of what we said we were going to do next year. We're taking a longer view on that to go what is realistic, and trying to realistically look at what can be achieved. We also realise that council in many ways is a price taker. Interest rates rise, fuel costs increase, the impacts of materials and so on that are going up through inflation. We are a price taker, and we are having to take an honest look as to what does that mean for our program going forward.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Just to follow on from that, Cameron, do you see after you start looking at all the deliverables and the costings and that there will be a reset before the end of the next quarter? That you'll be bringing something to council, that we will have to start looking at some of the projects to say, well, look, we might actually have to rethink whether these can actually be delivered?
I think in terms of the capital program projects, the logical place in my mind would be through the annual budget committee of council meeting, where we will bring to you a schedule of what we have identified as not likely to be completed this year, and when we think that would be able to be completed. So that is coming.
So you're doing that in parallel with the annual budget? Yes. Okay, no, that's fine, thank you. Okay, Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just two questions. One is around the Civic and Cultural Precinct Master Plan draft. What is the spend, and just in terms of transparency, Cameron, what is the spend to date that Council spent on it?
I don't have that level of detail in front of me, but I can come back to you with an answer to that, and I'll check with the team and get an answer as soon as I can.
If we could get that answer today, that'd be great. And my second question is on page 78, just looking at the FTEs. In 2018, we had 575. In 2022, we've got 687. Could someone just give me an answer why there's been such a big increase in FTEs between that period of time? Thank you.
Patrick, over to you. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, the short answer is the FTEs have grown in support of the Council's growth ambition. Growth always has a tail, and we have grown significantly to deliver the ambitious growth strategy that EU governance has given us. So when you approve programmes, there's often a staffing cost element of that programme. That would increase FTE. When the organisation grows enough, in any variable model, you need to have more overheads to support a growing organisation. And if we look at our FTE, there's a lot of weaknesses of doing this, but if you do a bit of a comparative analysis with, for Palmerston North City Council against other councils of similar size, and when you adjust the FTE to remove our operational workforce, and the reason I distinctly do that is PNCC by a stretch has the largest operational workforce in still having its own fully functioning depot, you would find that our adjusted FTE is under 500, which puts us lower than comparative councils. So I understand, absolutely understand the question around growth, and perhaps we can do a better job of helping you understand what the cumulative growth will be when you approve all of the programmes. But the simple answer is the council's grown to deliver your programmes.
Just one further question, Madam Chair. The makeup of full-time to casual staff, would we be able to get a breakdown of that?
The short answer is not easily. And the reason it's not easy because there's a lot of fluctuations. So if we think, for example, of the great work that our parks team does in keeping Palmy as beautiful as it is, there's a lot of that's casual. It's obviously very seasonal as well. Events has a bit of a seasonal component to it as well. So at any given time, it's a wee bit difficult, but I'll certainly take the action to go back and say, as of now, as of this season, this is roughly what it looks like. Recognising we are also using casuals to backfill because we have a reasonable number of vacancies as well.
So you could do a snapshot.
Yeah, we can do a snapshot, but I just would wish to remind you that there are seasonal fluctuations to that.
That's fine. Councillor, are there any further questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Cameron, and to the CE for the quite extensive report. I've just got a couple of questions, if I can find them. So a number, just as probably this is a general question to whoever wrote the report. So we have a lot of Māori names, but we don't have the English next to them. So Te U Tanganui should have the English version with it as well. And I'm just making probably a comment on that. And the same with Te Huringa, Streets for People. I think Councillor Barrett may have asked it. I was writing when he did. Was the NZTA funding? It's on page 21 around the program delivery. Are we getting closer to that alignment? Not sure who should be answering that. There's a comment here that there's non-alignment at the moment and it's affecting delivery.
Who wants to? Sarah will answer that, Mr. Mayor.
Through the Chair, Sarah Sinclair, Chief Infrastructure Officer. The impact of the, what that's really referring to is that there was a 4-month delay, two things. One, there was a 4-month delay in achieving the funding, which meant that our programme is effectively 4 months off whack. So it's going to carry 4 months in the year. The other element of that was that not everything that we asked for has been funded. We've discussed how to deal with that on a case-by-case basis in separate council meetings, and we've agreed ways forward in terms of what council will continue to fund to continue to keep progressing. But that's what those two elements are that refers to.
Okay, so you're telling me we're all fine? Because do we need to take this higher, or does it? All the programs are fine. We're all matched.
No, we're not matched. So I'm sure you're aware of things like the bus terminal.
No. Sorry, Sarah. I don't mean those. I mean, it says here the delay in release of funding has affected the timing of program delivery. Are we talking about programs that we're all quite sure that we're going to deliver? We've got the matching funding. It's all there. We're ready to go. We're not getting mucked around by our partner.
No, through the chair, it's ready to go. We are simply approximately 4 months behind. We're very lucky that we've got Thornton Hogan locked in, so we're not experiencing the same supply issues as we would if we were tendering lots of small contracts. So everything that we know that we're funded for is in train.
Okay, all right. Just a couple more questions. Sorry, Madam Chair. Just on page 24, and you spoke about Fulton Hogan, program 115, the sealing of roads, pathways, issue with Fulton Hogan and their I suppose, portable plant, asphalt plant. Are we back on track now, or we still got issues?
Through the chair, again, there is a delay to getting, there is a delay to getting the asphalt. The Higgins plant broke down over Christmas, which had quite an impact on plans over that period for resurfacing for us and for all the other asphalt users locally. Thornton Hogan is in the process of developing their own asphalt plant to get past that. But again, there's been a lag brought about through the lack of available equipment over the Christmas period.
Sandra, have you anything you want to add? I saw you waving your hand there.
Chair, Sandra King, Acting GM, Transport and Development. Yes, there's been a delay with the plant breakdown which affected the region in terms of asphalt supply. Weather is also delayed, but we're on track in terms of the resale program being delivered before the end of the year. We've got that fast-tracked, so we'll be seeing a lot more work happening on the network. Wet weather does delay things, so the nature of transport, and when we're building things, we need fine weather.
Okay, I'll leave that. I'll come back to you on some other stuff there. But it's just going on page 24. This might be a Steve question. Swaps. It talks about the value of it. Is there a little bit more explanation on that? It's obviously that's been better for us. Is that right?
We'll do that in the item where it is.
Yeah, that's cool. Just staying on page 27. Vehicle replacements. 1879. Are we electrifying the fleet? Are there any hybrids coming in? Or are we still purchasing diesels and petrols and everything else?
Kathy Deaver-Todd, Group Manager, Parks and Logistics. We are purchasing hybrid vehicles for our passenger vehicles because that technology is available. With our other vehicles, like the trucks and the utes, there isn't the suitable technology, but we are continually reviewing that as we purchase. Councillors, you'll be aware in your long-term plan you included an additional increased level service program which enables us to move from diesel and petrol-powered vehicles to electric as we get further on. The first time that program kicks in, I think, is next year, and that was specifically put in a couple of years away with the hope that the technology would be starting to catch up.
Okay. Just page 27, program 54, wastewater pipe renewals, the additional DIA funding. Just a progress on that. Have we got the remainder of that funding, or still coming, or?
Group Manager 3 Waters, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, that programme is pretty much 80% complete. The additional funding from the DIA project will be spent this year.
Okay, so there's another two odd million to come, is that right?
Not for this programme that I'm aware of. We're talking, I'll have to get back to you on the 2 million, but 600,000 was extra for this particular fund. I think Sandra might have some more detail.
I understood we got 9.6 or something.
Through the Chair, DM Acting Manager, Transport and Development. We got 9.34 million. We're busy spending that money. The program that you just referred to, we've transferred between projects. We've got a lining contractor in place, and because we were in surplus in some of the other areas, we're throwing it in to get some more relining done across the city, which helps with renewals.
Okay, all right. Page 29, program 201, around transportation, development contributions. Just a bit more detail there. Is that saying money's yet to come in, but we're expecting it? Just the language there, I was just unsure what that meant.
Through the Chair, Sarah Sinclair, Chief Infrastructure Officer. No, that was saying that the demand for the infrastructure timing is not yet well understood in terms of understanding when we need to be constructing.
Okay, thank you. Page 33, wastewater BPO, refers to the project group. Has any contact been made with Horizons and the timing of our consent?
Informal discussions through the Chair, Sarah Sinclair, Chief Infrastructure Officer. Informal discussions have been had with Horizons, and the consenting strategy is discussing more formal communications with Horizons, which we will be sort of reporting to the council separately.
Just a further supplementary question to that. So, bearing in mind we're 3 months away from lodging consent, are we going to be able to meet that, or we're obviously going to ask for an extension formally?
Through the Chair, the philosophy was that the consent was working on a year after selection of the BPO, which again, due to the COVID constraints, was in September, not in June. So we were working to a revised horizon, if you pardon the pun, of September. We have just re-looked at our programme in terms of the philosophy that it is better to get it right than to put in a consent that is not there yet. So we're working through timings with the project team, and we'll be coming back to council shortly with a recommendation.
Yeah, thank you. Understand that. I just wanted to know if you'd asked Horizons for the extension, but it seems that's still in progress. Page 34, water supply, Railway Road bore, probably up to the top there. When will that be operational?
Mike?
Mike Monaghan, Group Manager 3 Waters. So the site is going through commissioning as we speak. The actual production of water is predicted to be around about, I think it's May or June, because we're just waiting for drinking water results back for groundwater compliance. But the site's expected to be completed within the next couple of months.
Okay, thank you. And just my final one, sorry. Just on page 39, where it goes through the measures, transport measures in number 2, it states that our road surfaces are rated at superior at 85%. Is that correct? And how do we measure that?
Sandra.
Sandra King, GM, Acting GM, Transport and Development. It's measured through I'm trying to remember the measures. It's measured through assessing the data on the network. It can be lag data as well. So what you see, it's a smooth measure that's measured. And I would have to come back to you on the timing of when that was last done. It's done cyclically, generally every 2 to 3 years. So you might see a deterioration since that data.
Okay, good. Thank you. No, I'll leave it there. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I've just got a couple of questions around the Connected and Safe Community KPIs. So on page 43, there's description of library services. And I note that the mobile library has been off the road. And I wondered, has that been off the road for the whole 6 months? And what is the plan for re-establishing that level of service for the community around the provision of the mobile library?
Chris will answer that question.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, I know it's a worry for all of us, the fact that we can't deliver all of our services at this point. So and I'd need to check the exact details, but yeah, the bus has been off the road for some time. A combination of a number of reasons. Partly it's been staff-related reasons, but the biggest reason is relating to the purpose that we actually use the bus for, and the fact that we can't take it to most of the places that we would usually use the bus for. Having said that, the team is looking for, we have examined some ideas around some alternative uses for it, and at this stage we don't have a clear plan for that. But it is something a bit like, trying to identify options for click and collect, which is now working, and some other things that the team have been working on. But at this stage, there is no clear plan for the bus until such time as the settings change and we're able to take it where we would normally take it.
So just to follow up on that then, Chris, please. Is there a reason why the bus can't do its usual stops around neighbourhoods? I mean, I understand you might not be able to go to a residential setting or a school or whatever, but is there any reason why the mobile library bus couldn't do its normal stops, just in the streets where residents have used it in the past to be able to access their library books?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd prefer to leave the detail of that answer to get the team to go into the details of that particular situation. I know generally the reasons, but I'm not sure of that exact reason why they're not using it for that. Sorry.
Okay. So will someone come back to me or the rest of us on that, or do I need to put some recommendation through?
I understand there is already a request for some information around the use of the bus, and I think we can respond to that. I know that was in process.
Yeah. Okay. It's just I don't think, I certainly had not been aware that the bus had been totally off the road all year, and that there were no immediate plans to get it back in action. So that's why I'm following up. My next question is around the reduced opening hours days for Central Library and Youth Space. And I'd just like to have an understanding of how long we've had that reduced level of service, and again, the reasons for it, and whether there's any change planned in the next quarter.
Through you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I had thought that we had been communicating the situation to elected members. So maybe we need to go back and check what we've been doing there. But basically, and I can't remember the exact dates, but there's the situation is, really has come down to the assessments that we've done through looking at the risk assessments for those, all of our venues and facilities. Some of them are related specifically to the operating environment for the staff. We have a situation, particularly in the Central Library, where it's quite a difficult environment for staff and for the users at times, particularly with masks. So there's been some reduction in hours, for instance, closing during the middle of the day, so the staff can so we can roster staff to take a break without masks. As you're probably aware that we don't have a proper air conditioning system in the library as well, and certainly through January we did have issues with just the heat, and it got to the point where it was, I don't think we specifically shut it down for that reason, but we were having to consider the safety of the of the staff and the users at that point. It is something going forward. It's something that we'll constantly monitor. As we've said around, particularly when there are changes to the settings by government, we will always, we'll go back and re-examine the risk assessments of each of our venues and what have you, and update them accordingly. But at this stage, it is about just issues relating to the settings and staff safety and user safety for that matter.
Okay, so just to be clear, those reduced levels of service are due to us being in the red traffic light zone, and once that it changes, we can expect a return to normal levels of service?
I think that's a reasonable assumption, but I think some of the reasons are direct and some are sort of indirect flow-on impacts. So again, as they come off, we'll be able to reassess. And look, I think the thing I can give you a reassurance is that the staff in the library are concerned about trying to deliver the services that they should be delivering to the community, and are doing everything they can to do to maintain as much service as possible.
Oh yeah, totally understand that. I'm just trying to be clear of the reasons for it. If it's a staffing or resourcing issue, or if it's purely down to the COVID traffic light setting. So thank you for those answers. Madam Chair, I've got one more question around the pool use on page 40.
Thank you, Chris.
So I'm not sure, maybe this is for Kathy or whoever compiles the reports, but I note that there's been a reduction in visitors to the pools and a significant reduction in the usage of children under 5, and that some of that can obviously be attributed to the lockdown. I'm just wondering, when we look at statistics for the whole year, can we have some kind of separation of visitor numbers during the lockdown versus visitor numbers, say, as we are now? Because I think when they all get added up together, it can make it quite tricky to work out what the trends are and what's actually happening. So I wondered if, in terms of the reporting, we could have some kind of comment or division around where things were at during lockdown and where things are at now. Is that possible?
Kathy?
Yes, Kathy Deaver-Todd. That's entirely possible. I think councillors, you also need to highlight that there's some complexity this year, that we had seen a drop-off, particularly during the period where Memorial Park Splash Pad opened, and so we had a movement of people to there, but and there has now been a recovery because of the weather conditions. So it's a tricky, complex one. COVID, Memorial Park and the weather conditions all combining on top of each other. I can do my best to try and separate out or give you some commentary about those influences, but the data is not very clean.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I'm aware that there's an increased focus at the moment on accessible pool options for people, particularly in the light of the drowning figures for this year. And I just wondered whether we have got a problem with lack of facility, or whether the problem is really around accessibility. And it's really hard to tell that when all the statistics just come as, one combined figure. So even if it's just commentary rather than figures, I think that would be helpful in helping us understand the trends. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any? Councillor Naylor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one follow-up question. Councillor Harpeter asked the question around the spend to date for the Civic and Cultural Precinct program, and I think also if we're asking for that information, it might be relevant to understand what the expected cost for this financial year would be for that program also, please.
Okay, that will be noted. Is there any other councillors before I'll ask the final question? But I'm just checking, is all councillors... Councillor Bowen, now that we have Manager Chris Dyberg here, did you want to ask that events question?
I've put forward a recommendation, Madam Chair, so we'll just take that.
You're happy with that? Okay, thank you. Okay, and I've just got, most of my questions have been answered. I've just got one small question, and it's around potholes. I don't know, but I just keep getting call after call from residents around potholes, and I've noticed myself that I've had a few. So is it just with the change of contracts, or can somebody... Is it the weather, or is it just the time of year? I don't know.
Through the chair.
Thank you, Sarah.
And I'll pass on to Sandra to add more detail after this. But no, through you, Madam Chair, no, I think it's fair to say that the road network is deteriorating. The way historically that roads have been managed in Palmerston North is to do a small rehabilitation every 5 years or so, which means that there's ongoing need to fix. And certainly the impact on some of our roads, particularly of heavy traffic through the Gorge Road being shut, has led to more heavy traffic through the city, which places a higher load. But I think generally, no, I don't think that our renewals have necessarily been, over time, keeping up with the deterioration in the road. I think this alludes to the Mayor's earlier question, and we are looking at how what we need to do to bring business cases forward to bring more work into renewals.
So
because
we
do have a fixed programme for the potholes. There was a period of time, and Thornton Hogan, we're bringing a report to the Infrastructure Committee which will show the work that Thornton Hogan does on identifying and fixing potholes, but we're certainly seeing a trend of a deteriorating road surface.
So,
Sandra, sorry.
So it's, are you saying that we need to consider that more budget for potholes?
I think my preference would be more budget for road rehabilitation so that we get fewer potholes rather than budget to fix the potholes. I think we've got a maintenance programme that does a find and fix, but that's not really addressing the root cause through the chair.
Yeah, that's the ambulance. You want to prevent it. Okay, thank you. No, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, right. We've now done all the questions, so thank you very much, Cameron. You may come back to your seat. And we'll now look at the recommendations. Councillor Harpeter, did you just put your hand up?
Yes, sorry, Madam Chair. I've just got one last question. It's just something that's popped into my head. It's just a question that Patrick asked, talked about with the FTEs, he talked about having 867 FTEs to have in the organisation in order to achieve our vision. I just wanted to answer to that question is, does that mean have we got enough employees to achieve our vision, or do we need more employees to achieve our vision? What is the ultimate number of employees do we need to achieve our vision? What is the number?
Okay, thank you. Patrick will answer your question.
Through you, Madam Chair. I think the number is 687 FTE, and that's what we're currently funded for. I'm working on the assumption that we're currently funded to deliver the vision, then that's the number. Of course, as the vision changes and as market pressure changes, we've got a high number of vacancies in part because it's difficult to attract and incentivise the talent into the council. That number might change. And the only other factor I would say, Leonie, which does play out, and my colleague Sarah can speak to this a little bit, is one of the other factors that changes our FTE staffing is when we start to bring some functions in-house. Management is always looking at what the right delivery model, most cost-effective delivery model is for the ratepayer in PNCC, and where we have found that there's an opportunity for us to use the market because the market has expertise, experience, and we can get a nice commercial rigour around it. We obviously use consultants and contractors, but there is a feature of the recent infrastructure change which is establishing some new capabilities in PNCC. And so what you'll see, if you like, is a transfer in funding from their consulting or professional services budget into the remuneration budget as we start to deliver that service in a different way. So that's the long answer. The short answer is if we had 687 FTE, that's what we are funded for. We should be able to deliver your vision, notwithstanding the fluctuations in the labour market and different cost pressures.
That answer your question, Councillor?
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Patrick. We now go to our recommendations. So we'll deal with the extra recommendations first. So and we've got Councillor Bowen, there's another one. Is that number 6? So we'll deal with yours first. We'll go from the bottom up. I think it's easiest.
Excellent.
So Councillor Bowen, so that recommendation is that the CE quantify the likely underspend across PNCC 2021 to 2 events and events-related budgets and bring forward a report on options to reallocate funds to provide relief and support to the city's events sector. And that's moved by Councillor Bowen and seconded by Councillor Johnson. Do you wish to speak to that, Councillor?
I will briefly. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity that this report has provided to drill into some of the detail, or not in this case. And the General Manager, Chris Dryberg, and I have been in discussion about this issue, which came to the fore for me because the government has stepped into this space and the events sector generally is very grateful for the funding from the Ministry for Culture and Heritage, but local government events sector is specifically excluded from that funding. So the situation we have is one that we're all very well aware of. Our events offering for 2021-2 is not what we expected it to be, not what we rated to provide, not providing the level of service our community expect from us. And at the same time, because of the traffic light related cancellations, we're putting our ability to bounce back from this seriously at risk. We have an events sector, particularly the technical element of our events sector, staging, lighting, sound, PA, who've seen their business disappear. So what I'm asking for here is to quantify the likely underspend, because I can't see that information in our reporting, and I have asked officers to have a look at that for me. I think that information is available, just not in this format. And to look at what, if anything, we can do with that in this financial year. So to reallocate the underspend, or some of the underspend, to a purpose which gives effect to our intention to have a vibrant event sector for the city that survives this year. And so this is a request for a report. The work is already going on in the background. I expect that that can be provided quickly and give officers some direction. Fair to say that there is underspend in these budgets. Where there isn't underspend is in our COVID relief fund, which yesterday only had $20,000 left in it. So there is a need for support in our arts, community events sector, and this is one way we can look to do that within existing budgets, and I'd ask for your support for this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have no one else that... Mr Mayor.
A question to the mover and the seconder. So is this just arts, or are we talking all the sector?
This is, I've specifically not said arts, I've said city event sector. That's, my questioning was around the measures outlined in the report, which were community, city centre events, library events, that includes heritage events. There's a section for sports events in there. This is about our events sector at its broadest level, but I'm not proposing a solution. I'm asking officers who are much better placed than I to come back with proposals for how we might provide that support.
And just another question to the mover again. Are we talking venues as well, or are we just focusing on the people around it?
I haven't specified. Officers may well have a view on that. What it won't include is our CCOs. I'm very well aware that officers are in discussion with our CCOs, and they will be coming separately if they have particular requirements. So it's not my intention to muddy those waters.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, I just wanted to make a couple of points in addition to those that Councillor Bowen has made. And the first one is that when we established the COVID Relief Fund 2 years ago, we didn't really know and we couldn't really predict where the financial impact from COVID-19 would fall on the community. And I mean, in some ways, we were quite forward-looking in establishing a fund at all, but we kind of thought that it might affect more community organisations providing social support, that people would lose out on their funding grants, and that would be where the bulk of the need lay. But in fact, as time has gone on, what has become clear is that the sector that's most affected here is, if you like, the sort of the gig economy. So it's when you set up an event and then it can't go ahead, and you've already got cost. And most of the sort of infrastructure, both people and things that lie behind these events, has had a very difficult couple of years already. And it's not looking like even as though the next 6 months is going to be any better. And so I think, you know, we couldn't really predict 2 years ago where the need would be, but now it's a lot clearer. And I'm very concerned in particular for the sort of community events sector, that where if we don't put some support in at this stage, people may not be still in business to provide these events if and when they can get back up and running. So I think given that we've got a significant underspend in the events budget this financial year, that would be sensible to look at how some of that could be reallocated to support this big sector. And as I say, it's not just the arts, it's, although the arts are part of it, it's the community events, it's the sporting events, you know, it's the even the more major economic events. There's been a real effect on those people who provide those events, and we as a city, we've been relying on our events as one of our kind of strong points to bring people in, to provide economic activity, to provide social cohesion, and we want that event sector to be able to be up and running again as soon as possible. So I think it would be sensible for us to look at how we could provide support for them. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Denison.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. I'm challenged in the light of making policy on allocation without the report, so I can see why we need something to come forward. I'm not. We had the event, the COVID relief fund, which I would rather have things sit in and have just one circle around our allocation for response in that way, and whether we review that to increase the budget in that pool rather than trying to tag specific sectors into recovery. And again, I'm also challenged whether it's actually the city's role to be in a recovery agent over and above the government's allocation in response to some of these sectors and businesses and all the like that's available to apply for. And so I've got mixed feelings on this, let's just put it that way. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen, do you want to close or you're right? Oh, sorry, Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm quite happy to support this recommendation because all it is a report on the reallocation of funds that we've already budgeted for. So the money, it's not extra money into the budgets, it's money that is already there. We're just saying because the event sector has basically been decimated over the last period, maybe we should be reallocating it to keep that sector alive so that we can start to look at what happens in the next period. I do know that things like, sound technicians are really specialised fields, and if we start losing those guys, it'll be really hard. We'll have the same situation that we do with contractors of engineers and things like that, once we lose them, they're gone, and it's very hard to get those skills back. So we should be providing as much support as we can, and this is money that's already there. So I'm quite happy to see a report on what we can do to support that. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Reiterate, Madam Chair, that the government support for this sector specifically excludes local government, which is why I'd like us to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now all the comments are done, so we will now go to vote. We'll just wait till we get the online crew on board. So, all those in favour, raise your hand. Anyone against? No, that is unanimous. Councillors, I plan to take a break now before we go into comments for the rest of the report. We will be breaking at 12 o'clock for lunch and then coming back at 1 o'clock for Sport and Rec to start, and then we'll reconvene because I'm sure that I'm not going to get all this done before lunchtime. So we'll break now and come back at 5 to 11. Thank you. Okay. Right, welcome back everybody. We will resume. So we will go back to our recommendations. So we'll just get those back up on screen. Okay, I'll read them out. Item number 4, that a report is presented to the March Finance and Audit Committee meeting outlining expected forecast variations to operational budgets. That ongoing reporting on variations to operational budgets is included in future quarterly reports as outlined in Clause 210 of the Delegations Manual. That any operational program greater than 100K that is forecast to exceed 30% over the approved operation budget is paused until such time as Council approves the additional budget for the financial year. For financial year 2021-22, and that is moved by Councillor Naylor and myself. So, Councillor Naylor, would you like to speak on those?
Thank you, Madam Chair. These additional recommendations have been developed as a result of reflecting on the quarterly report and really acknowledging that it's a very thorough report in many aspects of Council's work, and in particular gives us really good, thorough information on the capital program, capital new and renewals. But in reflecting on it, it does seem that it needs to be strengthened in terms of reporting on the operational variances. And I think reflecting on the discussions and questions that elected members have had this morning, it's clear that there is an additional level of detail that elected members would like to see come through. And at the moment, sometimes elected members are reliant on having to send councillor help queries for individual items and get that understanding, and that's not always, that information is not always provided in a timely manner. So this is really asking for that level of reporting to be included regularly in this quarterly report. And looking at where I've really looking at the second recommendation there, recommendation 5, this is outlined already in our delegations manual in clause 10, 210, that specifies that operating budgets or programs which are greater than 10% variance should be reported to the Finance and Audit Committee. So the third recommendation, or recommendation 6, is really ensuring that we align our practice with our current delegations manual. I'm aware that there is a review on the delegations later in the year, but just to ensure that in the meantime between now and then, that our practice does align with what is outlined in the delegations manual. And in particular, there are some restrictions around the ability for officers to approve any budgets greater than 30% of the relevant operating budget. And I think there were some questions this morning that perhaps the answers haven't been necessarily clearly provided yet. I think, so the recommendation is in line with that, with the delegations manual, but the 100,000 limit is just, it's about really until we get that report back in March, if the first, if everyone is supportive of that first recommendation, until such time as that information comes back in March, that gives us that information to see what variations exist, and that clearly there's elected members interested in unders and overs here. But in particular, that last recommendation puts in place a direction to pause any operating budget if it actually does exceed 30% of the budget, because the delegations direction, the delegations manual, based on my understanding of that, anything over 30% actually would need to come to council for approval. So it's really in line with that. So I hope that's clear. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions? Anyone online? I can't. I'll just get Cameron to speak with us. Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Naylor. Just trying to understand the recommendations in terms of what's been put in front of us here. In terms of reporting back as per the delegations manual, in which the Chief Executive is able to move budgets about, that is what we have put forward in terms of Attachment 6. So Attachment 6, variations to the 10-year plan approved by Chief Executive on page 77 is actually the section which we are doing that. We haven't moved much about above the 10% threshold. In terms of the items that are greater than 30% and approved by council, they are the items under the heading of Variations 10-Year Plan 21-31 on page 76, Profit and Loss. So those are the adjustments that have been made through council decision. So I'm just trying to understand what additional information is being requested here. In terms of forecasting, the delegations manual doesn't cover on forecasted spending, and that is an exercise that we do normally conduct internally. However, given the current situation that we've been finding ourselves in with COVID and so on, our focus has been on more around deliverability, particularly in the capital space, and reporting back the reasons as to why we are underspent in terms of the operating budgets, which is mainly around staff vacancies and delays to programs, as opposed to budget changes. But just wanting that additional clarity as to what additional is being asked for here.
Councillor Naylor, would you?
I think that if this recommendation is supported, that the Chair and myself could perhaps assist with refining what is actually being looked for. But in a broad sense, I don't see the variations that have been talked about and are included in some of our reporting included on page 77. So, for example, I asked a question this morning about the professional services budget being increased by $2.4 million, and that wasn't able to be answered. But if it was included in this list and it said 2.4, if that budget's been increased by $2.4 million, I would have expected that would have been included in that attachment. So then I wouldn't have had that question. I could have looked and saw, okay, it's increased by $2.4 million because of such and such. And I guess there's been a number of other questions around libraries, events, etc. Particularly in a COVID environment where things adjust, we do need to have an ability to recognise what's changing and for elected members to have the information in front of them to guide their decision making around that. In a year where everything gets delivered exactly as the budget, perhaps this would be less important, but we're in an environment now where there is some variation, there are things that change. We need to be able to have that information in front of us and respond to it. So it may be an additional attachment. I'm not specifying exactly how that should look, but the delegations manual does specify that where it varies, by 10%, that should be reported. So, and I would like, I guess this is seeking that reporting to be strengthened. I guess I'm not being any more specific about how that should look other than that it should be in line with the delegations manual, but happy to assist in refining that if need be.
Thanks, Cameron. Are you right? Yep, I'll allow that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think in terms of what I understand of the delegations manual, the limits apply to budget variations within an activity, excluding of depreciation. So I'm just paraphrasing from the delegations manual. The reason why professional services in particular is a line on the profit and loss statement is appearing higher in the revised budget is because within an activity we are backfilling roles within an activity as opposed to moving money about between activities to deliver the levels of service. So it's a change in the type of expenditure within the activity, not a change to the program budget, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Cameron. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It's just a question, either to the mover or to Cameron, or both. About the third recommendation that's been put up here, I haven't got them in front of me, I presume it's number 6. What are the potential unintended consequences of directing staff to pause a programme?
Through Madam Chair, I can attempt to answer that. The unintended consequences are that work would stop, particularly because the recommendation refers to forecast spending, so we would then have to go through and do the exercise to forecast out all of those programs. But there are no programs that have spent in excess of 30% of the approved operational budget, otherwise they would be reported currently.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm happy to speak to this. I'm happy to support Councillor Naylor's recommendations, and for me, most of it is pretty much actually emphasising what we're already doing. And it's also, for me, a timing, and Councillor Naylor said it with the COVID. This report that we've got here is to the end of December, and I think we just need to have the timing of these things need to come up a bit more frequently. And I wouldn't expect to see very, very little in this March report, if anything. So I just think it's a timing thing, and with COVID, I think it just, with the facts that we are under and over budgets, look at the events situation, it just gives us a high-level view, just a better view. So I'm comfortable to support it at this stage. And if we get the report, and I'm happy to work with the Chief Financial Officer and Councillor Naylor to just nail down the detail of it without... are there any other questions? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have just got a question, just to clarify. My question's for Cameron. So, with regard to these additional recommendations, recommendation 1 and 2, or the first 2, so I'm not sure how they're actually numbered. The first 2 recommendations, is your view, Cameron, that those are satisfied by page 77, and so in actual fact, reporting would probably look very similar to page 77?
Sorry, just getting the wording, exact wording brought back up. Yeah, so you in effect would end up very much with what you already have, would be my comment, in terms of where budget is to vary by those percentages. So you would end up basically with what you have. In terms of if there is a change to the financial delegations policy, well, that review is still to come forward, and I think we should save changes to delegations manual until such time that policy review has been through the appropriate channels.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No one. Councillor Nally, you write a reply?
Yeah, thanks. Just to clarify a couple of points. The intent of these recommendations is in no way to change the current delegations, and I recognise any change would happen later in the year when that review is undertaken. The intent of these is to really ask for strengthened reporting around operational variances, and I think I would encourage. Yeah, I think that would be give useful information to elected members in carrying out their role. In terms of the third recommendation that and the question that the Deputy Mayor asked around unintended consequences, I think this is just in. I asked a question during the questions that are we aware, are there any variances in operational programs that exceed 30% over and above that program? And the officer's answer was not that we are currently aware of. And if in fact there are none, then this recommendation doesn't give any, it's null and void. But what this does is puts a safeguard in place that if in fact there are operational budgets that do exceed that those are paused until such time as council can view those variations and give it appropriate direction. So I hope that clarifies those points, but I'd encourage you to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Because it was a bit confusing because we were asking questions in the middle, just want to make sure that all councillors did get the right to comment. And I'll come back to you, Councillor Naylor, if we need to. Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor was next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief comment. I'm going to oppose these 3 additional recommendations. I am actually comfortable that the first 2 are already included within our report, and in terms of wider delegations, we've got a mechanism to review those with the delegations manual review, which will be coming at some point this year. In regards to the third recommendation, I have got real concerns around the concept of hitting pause on any programs just because we need to stop and do any forecasting. We've seen over the last couple of years actually quite significant delays where we have had to either go back out for things like tenders, get additional reporting, additional consultation, even hitting pause on programs to clarify information for elected members, which I'm not opposed to, but we've seen the ripple effect of delays through that. And so I think that we are actually already behind in terms of the work that we're wanting to achieve at the moment. And I think that this is just putting another roadblock in place. There are already mechanisms for reporting variations. If budgets are significantly out of kilter with the Chief Executive's delegations, then there already is a process in coming back and requesting more budget or changing course in terms of the direction we're heading. But actually I think that the idea of just pausing things and leaving it at that until we can get that a follow-up report back in is just going to create another delay that we do not need in this current climate. So I'm particularly opposed to the third one, but actually I think the first 2 are already covered, so I'm just going to oppose all of them. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I was just going to signal that I most certainly won't be supporting recommendation 6. I don't think there are any programs that actually fall within that category anyway. And there are some very clear and obvious risks to delivery of programs if council has to consider these and the programs actually pause. So I most certainly won't be supporting that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could we separate them?
Yes, we'll separate the last.
Do
you
that?
want
Yeah.
the last one? We'll separate.
So look, I have some real sympathy with Councillor Naylor that what she's trying to achieve. Councillors might remember the Bonsai House. So, you know, things do happen, but there are mechanisms to capture that. So I'm going to support the 1 and 2, or whatever they're called, 2 and 3. But the last one, I think we're probably jumping a bit quick on the last one. So thank you.
Are there any other councillors? No. Anyone online? No. So, Councillor Naylor, your right of reply.
Yeah, thank you. Just, I'll speak to the last recommendation, just a couple of points. It was mentioned that, the Deputy Mayor mentioned that she didn't want to put any roadblocks. I guess it depends whether you see this as a roadblock or a safeguard. I think there have been enough times in my recollection of decisions coming to this table where whether we say yes or no is actually irrelevant because it's already happened, the money's already been spent. And I guess what this does is puts a safeguard that actually we do things in the right order. That if there is to be an increase this is specifically around operational budgets, not capital budgets, by the way, so it's also important for elected members to note this is just giving direction around operational budgets. If there is to be an increase to an operational budget that exceeds 30%, that should come back to council for council's decision. And so this really just clarifies that. I think that's a safeguard. I think that's a good way to do business. I think that is a responsible way for this council to ensure that things happen according to our current process and our current delegations. So this is not really saying things should happen differently. This is just really reinforcing that things happen in the right way according to our policies. So I do think would encourage you to support all three. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'll separate out the last one. We'll do the first two together, and I'll call for a division on both. So if everybody's okay, is it 4 and 5 we'll do together when we get them up? So we're doing 4 and 5 together, and we'll call a division. So I'll pass to Hannah to... Oh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just call councillors' names members' names, because we have a appointed member on this committee as well. So if you could tell me if you're for, against, or abstain. Councillor Naylor? For. Councillor Meehan?
For.
Councillor Butt?
For.
Councillor Finlay? For. Councillor Dingwall?
For.
Councillor Barrett?
For.
Councillor McKellard?
For.
Councillor Hancock?
For.
The Mayor?
For.
Councillor Bowen?
For.
Councillor Dennison?
For.
Councillor Petrinas?
For.
Mr Armstrong?
For.
Councillor Johnson?
Against.
The Deputy Mayor?
Against.
And Councillor Harpeter? Are you there, Councillor Harpeter? We'll take it that she's
Against.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Against. So, Madam Chair, I have 3 against, and that will mean 14 for.
Okay, thank you. So that is carried. We'll now move on to item number 6. Over to you, Hannah.
Councillor Harpeter?
Against.
Deputy Mayor?
Against.
Councillor Johnson?
Against.
Mr Armstrong?
Abstain.
Councillor Petrinas? Councillor Dennison?
Against.
Councillor Bowen?
For.
The Mayor?
Against.
Councillor Hancock?
Against.
Councillor McKellard?
Against.
Councillor Barrett?
For.
Councillor Dingwall?
Against.
Councillor Finlay? Councillor Butt?
For.
Councillor Meehan?
For.
Councillor Naylor?
4.
And don't forget me. Against.
Against?
Yeah.
Did I do the same in
Yeah,
the
you
first
did,
vote,
but it didn't.
Madam Chair?
I just realised it before.
My
It's fine.
apologies.
It's fine. It's not going to change the vote, so I won't worry.
So, Madam Chair, the last vote was for?
Yeah, against.
Against. So I have 10 votes against, so that one has, and 1 abstention, so that one has failed.
Okay, thank you. So that one has failed. So we'll now move on to the 2 substantives. Okay, so I'm happy to move the first one, and Councillor Barrett. So first one is that the committee received the memorandum titled Quarterly Performance and Finance Report, quarter ending 31st of December 21, presented to the Finance and Audit Committee on 23rd of February 22. That Council note and approve that the capital expenditure and associated revenue values in the 21-22 long-term plan budget relating to 3 water reform funding will be changed as per the details in Appendix 4 of this report. So are there any comments? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to highlight this reporting cycle, I think, just continues to strengthen in terms of the information that is associated with specific line items and budgets, as well as the clarity around KPIs. I think the narratives there have really strengthened. There's a lot of specificity and detail in that. I'm sure it takes a huge amount of work for the team to assemble all that information. I really, really appreciate having that level of detail there, and wanted to ensure that staff are made aware of at least my appreciation for the obvious effort that's gone in here, and really has allowed us to examine things in a level of detail that I think is quite appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'd just like to make the comment, this is the first 6 months, and it's been a very tough 6 months. And for us to have, you know, a 5.1, I think it was 5.1 operational surplus, but with the percentage of the programs that have actually been completed, when you weigh up what we haven't been able to do in this environment and what we have, I think we've done exceptionally well. But I'm saying that I think that the next 6 months is going to be probably one of the toughest, because we're starting to get the end of the year financial results from some of the businesses. I mean, the businesses out in our city now are finding it tough, but we are very lucky that because of our location, the fact that we've got so many inputs into our economy, we're really lucky compared to some of the other cities and people that I've been talking to out and about in other places. So we're very lucky, and I would just like to commend the staff, because I know with the shortages of staff and that at the moment, there's shortages of resources and product. It's been really tough, and I think we should just commend them for the work that they've been doing. Is there anybody else that wishes to make a comment? Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree. The city economy is actually probably outperforming the national economy for all the reasons you outlined. But I too want to thank the staff for really quite a comprehensive report, and I think it needs to be there because there is quite a lot happening. So thank you, Cameron and the CE and others that have participated in that report. I just want to comment on a couple of things, especially around sort of page 36 onwards and around those sort of performance measures. And look, I think there's been some good stuff, and there's some stuff that probably needs improving. I think the roading, and I appreciate the comments of officers around the quality of our roading network, and it's sort of the perfect storm with the economy improving. We're very much a logistics and transportation hub, and we're taking a lot of the Waka Kotahi's state highway traffic through our city network. So obviously our roading network is creaking, and I do like the comments back to us that not being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff filling potholes consistently, but actually rebuilding some of our roads and certainly some of our arterial routes into the city. So that's on the improve level. I think also we need a bit more visibility about some projects. I note the Fitzherbert Bridge lighting, quite a few of Rangatane's projects around the river, Te Mautoa Potoa, Anzac Park. I know that we're starting to get a little bit more visibility on them, but they're quite public, and sometimes those things sort of happen, and then we find out about it. So just a bit more visibility about that. Want to acknowledge the library as well. It is one of our crown jewels, and it's been really difficult for them in COVID times, and also just resource investment, building, everything else. So we can't forget that we were arguably the best regional library service in New Zealand, and I think we're probably still right up there, but we can't forget them. On the real good plus side, our housing portfolio, great to see general improvements around all of our properties, but also Papiaoia Place and that tenant feedback. It was really good to get that. And they even sent a Christmas card to council from the tenants, which was nice to receive. Normally you just get complaints from some residents. With the Safety Advisory Board, I don't think there's ever been a time where that organisation has been more important to us, and the connections that it has to services like the ambassadors. And I know that's been a service that we've provided from council, and it hasn't been unanimous in support around the council table, but I can tell you now that they have really mitigated some stuff for us in the central city, and they're doing a great job. So look, it's overall a good pass mark, and I think thank you for the work, and as the chair says, this is going to be a year of two halves, and we've probably still got a little bit of rocky stuff to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I was just going, I certainly agree with all the comments around the nature of the report, the detail, and the outcomes for the first 6 months, given the environment we're operating in. I do think, though, that we're at a crossroads. We don't have a crystal ball in terms of what's going to unfold going forward. There's a great deal of uncertainty, but we do know that some things will stay the same. I don't think the supply chain constraints and the resourcing constraints are going to lessen in the organisation. So I think it's important when we're thinking about our appetite to commit and do things that we're mindful of organisational risk and health, safety and well-being. And we've got opportunities to think about when we do stuff and how we can mitigate the financial consequences in a broader sense on all stakeholders. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and I just would encourage the management team when they're thinking about deliverability to look at it through quite a wide lens and try and balance all of those risks. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no further comments, so we will go to vote. So all those in favour, please put your hands up. Oh, the screen's disappeared. Okay, all four have their hands up, so that is carried unanimously. We'll now move on to item number 7, which is the Treasury report, which is on page 83. And Steve, you're in the chair.
Madam Chair, councillors, broadly take it as read, but I want to make a couple of comments, if I may. Based on what you've heard just now about the capital program and the like, of course you would expect the amount of borrowing we needed to do to be less than what the budget would have originally assumed. As at the end of December, we had a gross borrowing of 182 million, but 15 million of that was borrowed in advance to fund refinancing of debt that's maturing in the next 3 or 4 months. And we plan to borrow another 20 million in the next week or two to pre-fund stuff that's maturing in April next year as well. We do that sort of thing, as I've mentioned before, to prove to the markets that we have the liquidity to cover off those debt repayments, and particularly when there's a credit review coming from our credit agency in the next short while.
as a consequence as well, you'd expect the interest costs to be slightly lower, but that's been offset a little bit by the increasing interest rates at the moment. And as you're aware, we have a portion of our debt governed by the policy that we have that is fixed, and we fix that in the main through the use of a swap portfolio. And interestingly, even since the 31st of December, there's been quite a bit of movement in interest rates, and our swap portfolio is now as an asset of over $1 million, whereas at the end of December it was still a liability, although as the Mayor was making a comment I think earlier, which was talking about the 6.3 million movement over the first 6 months. So in broad terms, because of the interest rate increases, the swap portfolio is doing what it is meant to do, and it has it's reduced what was a liability at the end of June last year up to the end of the 6 months by improving by 6.3 million, and then since then, even at today's date, it's got a net 1.1 asset value, so that's going to take effect and help moderate the effect of interest rate increases over the coming months. So that's from me.
Okay, thank you, Steve. We'll open up for questions. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Steve, as always. Very comprehensive. So just could I confirm our net debt is 167 million?
Correct, as at the moment, and we're still deciding whether we're going to raise a little bit more or not for the rest of this year, in addition to the 20 million that will be raised shortly. But the net at the moment, yes, 167.
Okay, and I'm aware this is a historical report, but are we factoring in going forward the Turitea wind farm funding? And are we factoring in, and I know unless there's a change of government it's going to happen, but the Three Waters opting in funding?
In terms of the borrowing, the wind farm won't have any impact on that unless there's something that...
Well, it's revenue.
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, we've got revenue that we were expecting in, and we've budgeted for that as part of our revenue for this year. And you'll recall, I think in the current year we've assumed we're going to get $500,000. And although the wind farm stage 2 is delayed, the price for electricity is sufficiently high that the revenue for this current year will reach the budget, we think. And at the moment we've assumed that there'll be a bigger figure again into next year, and we're hopeful that that's still a reasonable figure that we've allowed for that. So that shouldn't affect the debt position. As for other funding from other entities, the debt is impacted by a number of things, including programs, but particularly for funding things like the development of the subdivision at the moment, which is awaiting cash to come from those sales, and that won't come for a few months yet. So that will mean there's quite a bit of a difference in terms of the impact of that, as well as other programs where we're seeking funding from the DIA and the like. So it's a bit of a balancing act in terms of the timing as to when we get these things, but I guess what I'm doing in terms of raising debt is raising it only when I see raising long-term debt only when I see there's a sustained long-term need for that debt. And if it's not, then we're just raising it very short.
So just on Madam Chair, you've teased out another question. So in terms of the subdivision, we're obviously, it washes its face. There is a surplus there.
Well, that's yet to come. The way in which you measure a surplus, I mean, in cash terms, there will be money, obviously, that we'll ultimately receive from that development. But once, the sections have still got to be sold yet, so, and that development's still yet to.
I'm thinking of, they're fully sold, and one would expect them to in this climate.
Well, you hope so, but there's still another phase of the development to go there.
Sure.
So there's quite a lot of variables in the equation, but we would expect still, as I understand it, that we'd make a surplus, a cash surplus from that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Steve. Just looking towards the bottom of page 86, there's a bullet point there that talks about the 30% assumption of, reducing the debt by 30%. Oh, where is it? The debt figures, the forecast debt figures, but reducing them by 30% each year. Now, I think there might be a haircut graph somewhere that reflects that also. Now, I'm just wondering, so is that basically assuming that we deliver 70% of the overall capital program in each year?
I guess broadly, yes. What we're saying is that so that we don't become over-hedged in the market, as we nearly did once before, we've become a bit more conservative in terms of interpreting that, and we're obviously checking from time to time how progress is going with the capital program to see whether we should change that broad assumption, but at the moment I've stuck with that assumption. The other key assumption, of course, the thing that's uppermost in our minds is about the timing of the three waters and the movement of any council assets and debt to any new entity. Some councils are raising money for a very short term at the moment, only through till the end of 24, to June 24, so that they can retire that debt when their waters passes. At the moment, we're choosing not to do that because we've still got a significant capital program over the next year or two, and we can still make choices about the term. But my attitude is that we'll manage the debt at the moment in the best interests that we can of the city, and take long-term decisions when we feel that that's appropriate. And we expect that if there are costs that would be incurred at the time any Three Waters movement, that those are the types of costs that can be covered off by the funding that comes from the DIA too. So I guess I'm trying to make sure that we're not doing things in a reactionary way that means we're making short-term decisions that we could, if there were some delay for whatever reason in the Three Waters, that we get caught out as a result of that.
Okay, so I understand the rationale for applying that 30% reduction. However, if we were to hit a year where the delivery of the capital program actually exceeded 70%, which is always the aim and which is always, we're sort of always told, often told that's what's likely to be achieved. Sure. Where would that leave us?
Well, as I said, we're reviewing each year as things go on whether that assumption is still a reasonable one for the high level decisions, and if it looked like, looking 12 months out, we were going to do a lot better than that, we would revise that assumption and make different calls about the way that we're managing the debt.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Johnson, I missed you before. Go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Steve. It's just a question about the bullet point at the bottom of page 86, where you mentioned that consideration is being given to increasing the hedging nearer to policy midpoints.
Yes.
So I presume there you're talking about the percentage of debt that is hedged.
Yes.
And the fact that because we're in an inflationary environment and interest rates are increasing, that actually there would be greater assurance for council by having a higher percentage of the portfolio hedged. Is that the correct interpretation of that?
That's broadly the picture, yes, just looking to see when are the appropriate times to do that. And so that's something that I take advice on regularly, and we're looking to find opportunities when both we and our advisors believe it is the best time to do that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions? No. Okay, so happy to move the recommendation. To have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Naylor. The recommendation is that the committee... Oh, thank you, Steve. that the committee note the performance of council's treasury activity for the 6 months ending the 31st of December 21. Is there any comments? No, this is straightforward and we're in the position that we should be in. That's forecasted, so that's good. So we've got through the first 6 months of this year, so it will be interesting to see the next 6 months. So we'll go ahead and do the voting. So all those in favour, raise your hand. Thank you. Anyone against? No, so that's carried unanimously. So we'll now move on to item number 8, which is the page 95, which is Awapuni Park proposal to grant a lease. And we have Bryce Hosking, Group General Manager of Property. Ready when you are, Bryce.
Thank you, councillors. I'm happy to take this paper as read. Just to be clear, this is giving us the ability to go out for consultation on the lease. It's not actually approving the lease at this stage. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Bryce. Are there any questions, councillors? Is there any questions for anybody? Oh, thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bryce. Paragraph 5.4, page 100, has a comment and it says, this will allow council officers to apply a consistent approach across the portfolio. So I'm assuming that the current approach isn't fully consistent. Can you give us a sense of what some of the inconsistencies are that you would be hoping over time to rectify?
Yes, I can. So all community centres need to have a lease, so this one doesn't. So that's probably the first and foremost one we're looking to fix here. But they also all have a management agreement that outlines expectations of how we're looking for them to operate and what we would like from them. But then also looking to get some consistencies around who's responsible for what in terms of maintenance and upkeep and things. Whilst majority of it is council, there are a few things that we, through the lease, it is the tenant's responsibility. So just want to get a bit of consistency there because at the moment it's historically been sort of done on a lease-by-lease basis, which creates inconsistencies.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the report. It's just for my own clarification, probably this question applies to the next report as well. Why are we leasing only the building part and not the car park?
Because the car park also forms an amenity for the park itself, whereas a lease only covers an area that is exclusive to the group that we're leasing it to. So given the car park will be used by members of the public as well, we basically need to exclude that from the lease. If we included it, the implication would be that the community centre would have sole control over that car park.
Thank you. That was helpful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? No one online. Okay, thank you very much, Bryce. So I'm happy to move the recommendation. I'm not going to read it all through. It's quite straightforward. And Councillor Barrett's going to second that. Are there any comments? No, we'll go to vote. So all those in favour, raise your hand. And everyone online. So that is carried unanimously. So we now move to the Bunnythorpe Recreation Ground proposal, and Bryce again. And that's 105, page 105. Ready when you are, Bryce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Much like the previous item, pretty much the same issue. The only difference here is it's a brand new community centre, so we need to be doing a lease for the new centre as opposed to in Awapuni, where it was, they had been occupying it for a long time.
So are there any questions, councillors? No one online? Oh, Mr Mayor, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You should know there should be special interest in Bunnythorpe. As the councillor for Bunnythorpe. Bryce, the toilets aren't part of it, is that right, or some toilets are part of it?
So the toilets are forming part of the building, so but we maintain them anyway.
Right.
So yes, they'll form part of the lease, but they're I guess dual purpose with the rugby club as well.
Right, and they're our responsibility.
Correct.
Because sometimes the devil's in the detail.
Indeed.
They're our responsibility to clean them. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. They are public toilets, and that will be explicit in the lease.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? No? So thank you, Bryce, again. I'm definitely happy to move this recommendation for the lease and seconded by Councillor Hancock. And yes, I was going to comment. I mean, it's great to be able to sign this lease up and offer it to them. So I won't make any more comment, but no, it is good to see that this project's finished and over the lines. Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I think we can't let this opportunity go past. I mean, the Bunnythorpe community, I don't know, I've been on council 8 years or so, and they have been coming to us for a long, long time. So it is quite good to see the community finally get their community centre. We did what I call a soft opening, and unfortunately COVID sort of got in the way of that. But it's nice to see the lease has been drawn up. Bryce will be pleased as well. It's been a good project. The community actually put money in, significant money into this. So I think it can be celebrated and worthy of stating so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So we will now go to vote. Hands up, all those in favour, and people online. So that is carried unanimously. I'm now going to move on to item number 11, and we'll do the health and safety report when we come back, because I don't want to start that and then adjourn for lunch. So as you're here, Bryce, are you okay just to flick into that one? So that's on page 131, and I'll just get my page. And that's the Herier Street Reserve Manawatu Lawn Tennis Club lease proposal. So Bryce, over to you again.
Happy to take this one relatively as read as well, but just to summarise, as part of the previous discussions on Herier Street and the future options of what that may look like, the tennis club did a submission on that process, and their submission was based around securing their term and continued tenure at the site. They did have an existing lease that did have a number of years left on it. However, Council instructed officers to go away and begin negotiations to extend that term further to give them that security, which is what we've done. And this report is getting approval to cement those negotiations in place through a new lease.
Okay, thank you, Bryce. Are there any questions? Councillor Butt?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again, Bryce. My question is regarding although it's not of big money, but why are we proposing or getting $250 plus GST while we are charging $1,400 to the community centres for the whole year?
The existing recreational policy that we're operating under sets the fees. So for recreational leases based on land, which this is, that gives us current direction of $250, and that's where that's set at, whereas a community centre is charged through a different means in that policy. So the simple answer is we're operating under our current policy, although councillors will be aware that a, I guess, revised policy of this is currently being discussed.
Right, thank you.
Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bryce, the length of the longer term for 10 years, is that to give the club some sort of surety around infrastructure and renewals of their own assets, i.e. tennis courts?
That was their request when they came to do it. We were unable to give any longer than a 20-year term under the Reserves Act, but yes, it was added security when looking to make some changes at Herier Street to basically of tenure where they are.
Sure, thank you.
Councillor Harpeter?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bryce. I remember when they came to us a while ago, they talked about doing this in conjunction with Netball Manawa 2. Is that still the case? Will they still be working in conjunction with Netball Manawa 2? Do we know that?
I'm unsure of that. I mean, this is at least directly with them for their purpose. Any discussions that they're having with Netball Manawa 2 may need to be directed to some of our park staff. I see Aaron Phillips is online. I don't know whether he has any insight into that. Otherwise, it may just need to be put to Sport Manawa 2. Aaron, did you have any comment?
Aaron?
Chair, with regard to the lease for the tennis club, this was unrelated to the netball proposal, which was talking about covering courts at Vortier Park and other facilities. The length of the lease was purely related to the Huia Street land disposal.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Bryce.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bryce. Just my questions relate to the removal or not, depending how we go on the early termination clause. Just wondered, given the potential future use of Huia Street, what analysis has been done around any potential sensitivity, reverse sensitivity type issues that might come up in the consenting of, let's say, a higher density housing development next to this activity. If we were to remove that clause, what analysis has been done around that, how that might influence the consenting process?
Simple answer is very high level. That was a consideration, but it hasn't been explored in any kind of thoroughness at this stage. Any kind of breach of lease would still be covered through the current lease clauses. This is really if council wish to terminate the lease for any other reason, I guess, other than breach of lease, which also covers things like disruption. And not paying rent and things like that is already covered. So this is really for any other reason.
Thank you. So can I explore that further then? Is the view that it is immaterial, or that it would strengthen our position or weaken our position in terms of any potential developments?
At this stage, my advice would be council can consider it as neutral. We would need to, when the designs, should we get to that stage, the designs for any kind of development on Huia Street would need to consider some of these things, especially around lighting and things like that. But that can be worked through that process. It's very difficult to answer this question until we sort of get to that stage in terms of a development.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is should we in prudence be answering that question before we commit ourselves to 20 years of not having actually a fairly standard clause in a lease?
That is a risk that council would need to consider on whether they agree to these terms. If they would like it put in, then they will have to pass a resolution to get that put back in, since this current resolution is not explicit on that being in.
Thank you. And a related question, but through a lens of if we end up in the, to my mind, unfortunate situation of Huia Street going to the open market, have we done any analysis around the potential market value effects?
No.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mickelard.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Bryce. Just one question just to clarify my understanding of this. And I understand that the removal of early termination clause as proposing option 1 provides MLTC with greater security regarding its tenure. I just want probably get some understanding around the risks analysis or risk assessment done here on page 132, which mentions that the extension or the extended lease term and removal of early termination clause differs from council's standard practice of lease reserve land. Can you please elaborate on that and help me understand how is it different from previous practices?
So our standard practice in all of our leases with recreational groups is there's a standard clause that we put in there around early termination that allows council for any reason to provide notice to the tenant, and that may vary between 3 or 6 months depending on the individual situation, and basically it allows us to terminate that lease, and the tenant would be required to vacate that site. As I said earlier, there is a certain degree of protection under a lease anyway in terms of breach of lease, so things like not paying rental or disrupting the surroundings and things like that. But this is really, this clause gives council, I guess, a bit of added protection should we have a strategic change or want to use some land for a different reason, or for whatever reason we want to be terminating it that isn't covered through the lease. This gives us the added protection. So that's been a standard procedure that we put in these leases. However, of recent times there has been some examples where papers have been brought to council for lease approvals where the tenants have requested these to come out, but we're probably talking 7 or 8 across the portfolio total now.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
So, Bryce, in this situation, regardless of Huria Street, I think that's irrelevant, but just for my question, but say in 5 years' time, the lawn tennis club's membership had, say, dropped to 20 people and they were still there, and we didn't see that there are other organisations perhaps wanted that, would we be able to give them notice if we took that clause out?
No, they have a right of renewal in their favour, so in 5 years' time they can choose to continue on or vacate, and that would be their choice. We would be unable to do anything other than through a breach of lease for 10 years.
So we could get in a situation where the membership had significantly dropped and there's nothing we could do about it?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Sorry to jump back in again, Madam Chair. Bryce, is it, I mean, this is the Manawatu, it's actually not a lawn tennis club, but it's still got it in the name, but it's about, the clause about the taking out the termination is really around renewal of assets for them, isn't it? Because they would struggle to get funding, would that be right? If they had, security of tenure would be in doubt.
I'm unable to comment of whether they would or would not be able to get funding, but yes, from their standpoint, having this clause in, they see it as a risk to their continued tenure on the site.
Yeah, okay, that's sorry. Yeah, no, you answered around, yeah, good, thank you.
Councillor Naylor, sorry I missed you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bryce. I understand that they wish to have some certainty, as with, I expect many groups would like to have certainty of a long-term use of land. Does this set us a precedent where, I mean, for example, in our next report, we're going to discuss a cafe lease for a shorter period. If we are to allocate a 20-year commitment to one group of people in our community, does that set us a precedent that we might need to follow that with other groups?
Precedent, no, but I would note that there has been several of these requests coming up in the last few leases that have been brought to the council chamber in the last few months. It is a challenging environment for some of these organisations in terms of getting things like funding, and tenure definitely does affect some of those decisions. So no, we're not obligated to do anything in that space. Council can choose to keep it in or remove it, but we are, it has sort of, I guess, slowly shifting from being 2 or 3 in very specific circumstances across all of the building portfolio to, as I said, there's probably 7 or 8 now.
Just further to that, because I don't know what council in 20 years' time, 7 terms forward from where we're sitting today, might be thinking. What would be the implications of terminating not following through with this lease? Sorry, cancelling a lease. Sorry, I'm not using the right words. What would be the implications of, terminating a lease prior to the 20 years if we proceed with this today?
So just for my clarity, are you saying if we did insist on that termination clause going in and then council made the decision to activate that clause, what would be the implications?
No, what I'm asking is if we proceed with the recommendations as outlined, but then in 18 years' time, if a council wants to, for whatever reason, change that, what is the implication of?
We would be unable to do that until the current lease is seen out. So the decision that you are making now essentially is locking you in the tenant's favour for the next 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Anyone online? Okay, thank you, Bryce. Okay, it's 12 o'clock and I think there might be some discussion on this, so I'm going to adjourn comments till after we get back. So this meeting is adjourned till after the Sport and Rec meeting.